Start though, any questions about ready to go? Okay, well, as everyone knows, we are here today to go through the start of our discernment process that requires us to have informational meetings, listening sessions, and as the letter indicated that we sent out, this is a time for everyone to be able to share their thoughts, their viewpoints, ask questions, everything of that nature as well. The thing I want to point out to you is as we've gone through this process and we've put together the presentation, one of the things that Randall and Bobby and I all talked about is the fact that we're not here to tell you what we think everyone should do. We're not here to make decisions for you. So as we went through this presentation, we very much tried to focus on being very objective in the presentation, show you all sides to the presentation, and for consideration, throw out some thoughts and items that we should maybe be talking about, considering in our decision-making process as well. But you know, we want you to understand that everybody has their own viewpoint, everyone has their own idea, their own decision, and we're not here to give you that, okay? So please don't take anything that I'm saying or Randall's saying in the process of today. Bobby is ill and not able to be with us today, but please don't take it as us trying to sway you one way or another. We're trying to be very objective in presenting the information and letting everyone make their own decisions on what they feel is best for our church and congregation, okay? Now, as we go through, we will have time at the end that if you could just, you know, if you can hang on to your questions till the end, and basically it will be open mic night for lack of a better description, because everybody has a voice and you are welcome to come up and share your thoughts, ideas, as well as ask any questions, okay? All right, so as we go through, first thing I wanted to kind of touch on is why are we here? And Sharon, do you have the clicker or do I? Okay. Okay, and I apologize, this is small, but we are going to have copies of these handouts for you so that you can take them with you as you go home, kind of think things through, make your decisions. We thought it was important you have the information to also be able to mull over and think about at home too. So we'll have copies of these available as you get ready to leave in the back. But basically, just to kind of go through some of the history on why are we here today? How did we get here? So the United Methodist Church has proposed a split. And if we look back at the history of the church, conflict has been a part of the church for many, many years under many, many topics in the past. You know, we can go back as far as 20 years ago and look at 20 years ago where it started having conflict, where we had questions arising on the foundation of our faith. We had bishops who came out and said, and even put in a book, that there's question as to whether the virgin birth actually happened, whether Jesus is God, whether Christ's physical resurrection actually transpired, and whether Christ is the only way to salvation. So, you know, as we all know, those are kind of the foundation of faith of Christianity and the United Methodist Church. And so we have conflicts that have happened all the way back from years and years back. The newest item that is really not new, it's been debated in the United Methodist Church since 1972, but it has escalated to the point where it's now at the forefront, and what is kind of looking to be the driving force of this split proposed for the United Methodist Church involves human sexuality. And basically what has happened is the Book of Discipline is very clear about human sexuality. Within the Book of Discipline, kind of paraphrasing, I gave you the language there taken right from the Book of Discipline, but basically ordained pastors are not permitted to be gay or lesbian. They also are not permitted to perform same-sex marriages either on church property or in the churches themselves. And those are what they call chargeable offenses within the Book of Discipline for these pastors. So basically what has transpired is you have the United Methodist Church saying, we want to change that language. We want to allow the LGBTQ plus community a place at the table. All right, we want them to be able to be ordained pastors. We want to be able to have the opportunity to perform same-sex marriages in the church or on church property. That is proposed for a vote to happen in 2024. That is when the split to the church is proposed to happen. And what is going to happen is you have, and maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I think there's another slide here that kind of talks about it, but you have, if you stay in the United Methodist Church and you want to just stay as is and move forward under the United Methodist Church, then if the vote is approved, you are accepting the changes to the Book of Discipline. All right. There is also another division of the United Methodist Church that's in the process of being created. Currently, there's an earmark of $25 million to be dispersed over a 4-year period for the creation of this new division of the Methodist Church. Now, none of this is set in stone yet because this is all supposed to happen next year at the 2024 General Conference. It was supposed to happen at the 2020 conference, and that then got postponed because of COVID. All right, so now it's looking to be at 2024. So if we go back when this all kind of started for the talk of the split, we have to go back to 2016. And in 2016, after a vote happened, there was a commission formed called a Way Forward Commission. And that commission was specifically sent to go bring a report back for the 2019 General Conference to indicate for churches that may want to actually separate from the United Methodist Church. They were not in favor of these changes that were proposed, that they were supposed to come back and report on what's the process going to be. All right, how should we actually work this in anticipation of a split? So as we look forward to the way forward, they came back at the 2019 special session for the General Conference, and they proposed the tailored disaffiliation plan, what they also called the exit plan, or as we've talked a lot within the church lately of provision 2553. Paragraph 2553 was introduced to the Book of Discipline. All right, this is what was outlining the provisions or guidelines for congregations who wanted to leave the United Methodist Church for reasons of conscience. All right, because of the proposed changes. That tailored disaffiliation plan, or 2553, has a sunset to it. It expires December 31st, 2023. So protocols were never actually voted on for that disaffiliation plan, but it was to be brought to vote in 2024 at the General Conference. So you can see how everything keeps, the can keeps getting kicked down the road a little bit there. But churches who leave before that 2024 conference, we've already been told if you separate before 2024, you're out and you have no vote at General Conference. All right, you've made your decision. You've decided to leave. You're now no longer a voting member at General Conference as part of the United Methodist Church. In the proposed protocols, this is where they actually propose that $25 million that's set to designate for a new traditional Methodist denomination for churches that may want to actually look at keeping the same Book of Discipline and not accept those changes. They wanted to give an option for that. That also is not finalized. That has to happen as part of the vote next year at General Conference. All right. So then as we look at 2553 being introduced, now we have to come to South Carolina and look at what happened in South Carolina, because our bishop in South Carolina, Bishop Holston, came forth and said at the South Carolina Annual Conference that South Carolina has not ignored nor acted contrary to current statements on human sexuality. Therefore, provision 2553 is not available as a means to exit the United Methodist Church. There are two other paragraphs within the Book of Discipline, 2548 and 2549, and the bishop further then declared that those two provisions within the Book of Discipline would not apply to this situation either. So in essence, the end result at that time, as of a year ago in 2022, earlier in 2022, was South Carolina churches were given no options to separate. We couldn't exit the United Methodist Church if we wanted to, all right? So then going forward, we had a district lay leader meeting in July of 2022. I came back and gave everyone a report following that meeting. At that meeting, we were told, hold tight, don't panic, give more time, pray about it, see what happens. More, hopefully better options are going to emerge. But the clock keeps ticking forward at that point. And as the months happened and South Carolina churches were seeing this sunset provision on 2553 looming at the end of 2023, and yet they had no options to separate, the pressure started happening. And one of the forefront churches of that pressure was Buncombe Street United Methodist Church in Greenville. It is presumed, although he has not come out and said so, it is presumed that the pressure from Buncombe Street and then other resulting churches in South Carolina over those next few months kind of forced the bishop into a corner. And so he came out and announced that he was going to concede and offer his own exit plan available for the churches in South Carolina, but he was going to use provision or paragraph 2549. Now, that paragraph has historically been used when an exiting church found that they needed to close the doors entirely. They could no longer keep functioning and keep the doors open. So that's where in the literature you're reading, you read a lot of the information it says for the church closure. All right, so keep in mind what the bishop is doing is using a paragraph of the Book of Discipline that applies when a church is closing the doors there. Local churches were promised that we would have the information of the bishop's plan by October of 2022. We continued waiting and waiting and waiting, and the bishop finally released his exit plan on December 19th of 2022. So that's why you saw delays of any action on our part to really have a lot of meetings, because there wasn't a whole lot we could do at that point. We had no options to request a separation until the bishop came forward in mid-December and said he was going to present his own exit plan. And his plan does not have the same sunset provision that expires at the end of 2023. But if you look at his plan, the option to separate, it invokes strict guidelines and deadlines to provide information that are very difficult to meet and to adhere to. And it includes a buyout provision, which they are entitling a tithe that is included, that basically you have to buy your way out of the United Methodist Church if you're putting in and want to separate. They're calling this a continuation or as a result of the trust clause. A lot of people have said, well, how do they have the right to make us buy out? Their premise is the trust clause, which is paragraph 2501 of the Book of Discipline. And for anyone who's interested, you can download the entire Book of Discipline on cokesbury.com. And there's a lot there, but the whole Book of Discipline is available. These are all parts that I've been pulling from the Book of Discipline, all right? So when you look at paragraph 2501, what it says is all properties of local churches and other United Methodist agencies and institutions are held in trust for the benefit of the entire denomination, and ownership and usage of church property is subject to the discipline. All right, so when we started having discussions on what did this really mean, basically we received clarification from an attorney, and they said they don't have ownership right to your property, because everyone was saying they're not on my deed, they're not on our titles, they're not on anything. How do they have the right for this? And he clarified, he said they don't have ownership rights, they have beneficiary rights because of trust clause 2501. All right, so that's why they're coming in and saying they can institute this tithe that is our buyout provision to get out of the United Methodist Church if we want to separate. It's all based on this. So one of the items of this whole process is that if you want to look at how much is it going to cost to buy out, which Randall's going to be going over all of the financial side of things shortly, but one of the things you have to do is this tithe includes 10% of all real property, 10% of all liquid assets. So that means we had to know, what is our church valued at this point, to know what the 10% number would be. So John, on behalf of the trustees, helped us coordinate of reaching out to the appraisal companies. An appraisal of Green Pond Church was performed just a few weeks back. That we do have the number for that as well, that we've been factoring in this past week to the cost calculations. If anyone would like to take a look at the document, which is a mammoth document, we do have a copy on the front pew that you are welcome to look through if you'd like to look at the appraisal that came back to us. Okay. Now, as we look at proposed options following the 2024 vote. So what we have to do is look at, if this vote happens next year, because there's still speculation on whether the vote's truly going to happen and what options are going to be voted on at that point. There is still time that things could change. But where we are right now, looking forward to what is proposed to happen during this vote that's to be at the General Conference 2024, the separation is supposed to be that there is going to be what they're calling the liberal side of the United Methodist Church. That liberal side, they retain the United Methodist Church name. They retain the United Methodist Church logo. They are the ones who want to change the Book of Discipline and remove the language on human sexuality. Okay, so they want to update and allow LGBTQ as pastors and same-sex marriage. Okay. We as a church, if we do nothing and this vote goes through and they approve it and they approve the changes to the Book of Discipline, our church remains under this division. All right. So anyone who doesn't do anything automatically rolls forward, stays under the United Methodist Church, but accepts whatever changes they approve. The traditional version of the United Methodist Church is going to be the newly proposed split of the church. And that division can retain the language as is in the Book of Discipline. So if we went with the traditional side, could request that the Book of Discipline not be changed, that the language be kept as is, which prohibits the gay and lesbian pastors and same-sex marriages. Now, the options for church affiliations after the separation was that their Global Methodist Church is the new division that's been in creation, all right? But that is viewed as the main option for churches who are looking to split, because that's where they're looking to funnel some of that, the fundage for the creation. Now, Global Methodist Church is already up and running. Other churches who have already gone forward with 2553, who have had churches disaffiliate, there are churches in other states who are already part of the Global Methodist Church. All right. For us, the Global Methodist Church would not be an option until the vote happens next year and the exit plan happens through that process. There are other divisions of the Methodist Church that I've listed there in the handout as well, that are available options if we chose to separate from the United Methodist Church, but wanted to then request to go under a different denomination of the Methodist Church. So we do have other options there that we could go under, including the Free Methodists and on down the line, in addition to supposedly the Global Methodist Church too. It's important to note, though, that we can't just simply say we're going to join the Free Methodist Church. There's a process to it. We do have to exit the United Methodist Church first and then request admittance to join these other divisions or denominations within the Methodist Church. Okay, everyone with me on this so far? So that brings us to, what does this mean for Green Pond United Methodist Church? And so using all of this back information we've just been talking about, as you can see, decisions need to be made by the church. We have the choice to either stay under the United Methodist Church accept those changes if approved to the Book of Discipline and stay with the denomination as is. If we do that, we keep our same hymnals, all the logo and name and things like that. We could possibly have options to exit or separate at a later date. That's kind of TBD at this point, but we could possibly consider separation at a later date, even if we chose to stay under right now. The next option we have is leave and buy out. So separate from the United Methodist Church and pay the tithe that they're calling it. One of the things as we've been kind of talking about things is, as you will see, it's a pretty costly number for us to buy our way out. Is that good use of our money? We could probably do it, but we'd be taking pretty much a lot of our savings that we have to do that. Is that what the Lord would want us doing with our money that's there? And if we do leave and buy out, then what? Do we join another Methodist church denomination? Do we go independent? There are things we have to kind of consider in that process. Under a Methodist church, you get pastoral assignments. That's all taken care of. If we go independent, we have to go find and pay our own pastor in the process. If we're under the Methodist church, either United Methodist or a different Methodist, pastoral benefits are provided for them. If we go independent, we have to go provide and find our own insurance, which is likely not going to be at the same discounted rates. The Methodist Church has a governing body already in place. If we go independent, what's our governing body going to look like? Is it just going to be our admin council, or what's that going to look like? And with the insurance, I have already been having some discussions with Southern Mutual that we're through. The insurance turns out that will not be an issue for us, because no matter what we decide to do, even if we are reorganizing under a new church name, new tax ID number and everything, we can keep our same insurance policies and just make the changes to the name and tax number and keep our insurance in place. All right. So thankfully, there's one thing that we don't have to worry about in that process is the insurance. All right. So option number 3, however, there is a joint litigation happening. And under the joint litigation, is my slide, I can't even read my own slide up there. Okay, it is showing up. Okay, so Sharon, I don't think this is the newest version. This is not the newest version of the, the copies in the back are the newest version, however, but the third option, joint litigation. All right, so what has happened is we've been having discussions with an attorney firm. We have actually paid $1,000 retainer to that firm already to have a 1-year membership with them. And that attorney firm, which is the Joint Commission of Life and Liberty, they are actually pursuing a joint litigation of churches in South Carolina who are not okay with the buyout provision offered by the conference, who want to try and fight that trust clause tithe provision. Okay. And so basically the premise of the joint litigation is we still go through the process of requesting separation now. We do not pay the conference now, and we join the joint litigation in hopes that it ends up lowering our buyout cost to the Methodist Church to get out. Now, one point to make here is, well, 2 points to make. The time that we're under the joint litigation, understand we're not going to be approved to separate from the United Methodist Church during that time period. So we're going to still be remaining under the United Methodist Church while that joint litigation time period is happening. So any changes that happen to the United Methodist Church in that process or that time period, we will be subject to those changes. The attorney also told us, Randall and I had a call with the attorney last week, and he told us, he said, understand the United Methodist Church digs their heels in and fights hard. He said, so I do not think this is going to be a quick and easy process. If I'm a guessing person, he told us it could go anywhere from a year to 2 years before something happens. The hopes is that eventually there's enough churches involved here that the the conference can't deny it and comes to the table and reaches a settlement. All right. But that's kind of TBD based upon the joint litigation option. The other option, which I told Randall, I thought we should call it dash and dine, is that we basically tell the conference, we're out, we're separating, we're not paying you, go ahead and sue us. All right, that we let them come after us because we didn't pay them, and we just tell them we're out, we're separating, but we're not paying what you're asking. And we're not really joining the joint litigation, we're letting them come after us in the process. So those are really the four options that we're faced with at Green Pond United Methodist Church at this point, okay? So where are we right now in the process? As part of a request to do separation from the United Methodist Church, you have to start what's called a discernment period, which has to be at least a 30-day period, and it provides the opportunity to engage in dialogue with one another, allow every voice to be heard, share the cost information with you, provide reasons to separate versus cons to separate, as well as go through, just seeing where everyone is within the congregation. Our admin board met on January the 8th and unanimously voted to approve the request of our discernment period and to explore separation options. Notification was made to the district and conference at that time to notify them that that was our intent to start in this process. Our discernment period started Monday, January 23rd, and it goes through Thursday, February 23rd. All members have an opportunity to review and receive the agreement to separate, which the agreement to separate outlines the entire checklist of all of the documents and information we are required to provide to the conference as part of our request to separate. We have to provide them with a copy of our appraisal. We have to provide them copies of insurance. We have to provide them with our letter that we had done notifying the members. There's like our cost estimation worksheet, bank statements, deeds of our properties. I mean, it's a pretty inclusive list, and it's a pretty invasive list that they want to know everything about our church in the process. And so we're in the process right now of having to go through and compile all of that information in those documents. We have the opportunity for you to have a copy of the agreement to separate. We'll be including copies at the back when you're leaving. That we're also including copies of the presentation for you, but then we also have copies of the agreement to separate that you are welcome to take a copy of those to review on your own. Or if you would rather receive the copy by an attachment to an email instead of having the paper copy, I also have a sheet at the back where you can put down your name and email address, and I'll send you a PDF attachment of the document instead if you'd rather have an email instead of the paper copy. All right. There are cost and other considerations that we have to take into consideration as part of our discernment process. And one of the things that is going to happen, so we have our meetings today. We have our next meeting is on Monday, February 13th at 6:30 p.m. Now, we have our vote set to happen on February 26th. What transpired is when we made notification to the district and told them of our intent to separate and to start through the discernment period, we told them that our congregational vote would be happening on February 26th. The DS immediately came back and said, I have your church conference set for February 26th at 6:30 p.m. In talking with the attorney, we may not want that to happen that way, all right? If we are deciding to join the joint litigation, we will not be holding a church conference with our district superintendent present. We will not be doing the church vote according to our conference guidelines. We will be holding our own vote using our own ballot of our own congregation outside of a church conference where we decide how we're proceeding on it. And if we're doing the joint litigation, We won't be holding that church conference because we are basically putting a halt to everything conference related at that point and joining the joint litigation. Okay, so what we want to do is at the next meeting on Monday, the 13th, I know that it is a little bit of an inconvenience to ask you all, but we would actually like you to be with us at that meeting as well. Yes, we will go through the same information here, give everyone a chance to talk, but what we want to do at that meeting is, since it would have allowed you a week to kind of digest everything, we want to do a little bit of an exit poll, so to speak, to find out where everyone's standing on the issue at that point, to find out what do we need February 26th to look like. If we have the congregation leaning towards staying in the United Methodist Church, we need to keep it as our church conference through the district. But if we're leaning to go a different direction, we need to uninvite our district superintendent to that meeting, is basically the premise of it. Make sense? All right, Randall, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about actual separation costs, and then we'll kind of wrap up from there.
I just want to say thanks to Michelle she's done a lot of hard work, as you guys can imagine. So everybody should appreciate everything she's put into this, because it's a lot to digest. But I've got a summary of the separation cost, and you don't have to worry about writing all this stuff down because it'll be in the handouts that you get there. But just running down the list according to the plan that the bishop put together, if we do pursue the buyout option, I'll kind of run down item by item. But first of all, we would have to be reincorporated, I guess, again, under a new church name, right? That would be $35. And then next, as part of what they're calling a tithe, that really has two parts, right? It's 10% of the real estate, so the buildings and the property that the church has, and it's also 10% of the liquid assets. So in other words, the money that's in our bank accounts. So for the church property portion of that, the church property was appraised at $441,410. So 10% of that is $44,141. And also the cost of appraisal is kind of factored into the separation cost also. That's $1,800 for the appraisal. And then 10% of the liquid assets, we had a little over $200,000 between the different bank accounts that the church has. So 10% of that would be $20,353.01. And also part of the requirement is we have to pay 12 months of kind of future apportionments, right? So every year we pay apportionments. It's a little bit like taxes that we pay to, the United Methodist Church, right? To fund everything that the church kind of at the national and the state level does. But the additional 12 months of future apportionments will be $13,062. And we also pay their estimate of our unfunded pension liability, which at this point, they sent an email, was $1,419.85. And also as part of this exit plan, we have to, calculate the cost of 3 years of insurance. And so based on using the December 22 numbers, the cost of that would be $22,000 and $92. So grand total, it's $102,802.86. So, almost $103,000, based on the plan that the bishop put together and the requirements of that plan. And that's, this may change slightly, but that's the best estimate that we can put together given the appraisal that was taken care of by the trustees and the appraiser, and then also the information that we've got from the district and from our account balances as of January 1st, which is kind of the date of record that they want you to use. And so if we do pursue the buyout path, all these funds, so this $102,802.86, that has to be placed in an escrow account by May 31st. And the anticipated church closure date would be June 30th. And I think you mentioned that earlier, but that's also in the slides. Basically, this is kind of a compressed schedule, I guess you could say, because it's a narrow window between finding out what the plan was. And then we need to have a church conference if we're going to leave by the end of February. And then, money must be placed in escrow account for the buyout by May 31st. And then the church closure date will be the end of June. So that's kind of the schedule if we do choose to pursue the buyout option. But that's all I had. And we want to open it up to open mic night, or
yeah, just a couple last mentions of things too. On the footnotes there, you'll see on the separation costs worksheet, footnote number 1 says we're currently exploring increases to our sexual abuse and molestation coverage under insurance to meet the conference requirements. So I've already been speaking with Southern Mutual and going through the insurance requirements. We're actually in pretty good shape for the insurance requirements. We have the $1 million limit required for pastoral liability. We have the $1 million general liability limit already in place. Where we're lacking is the sexual abuse and molestation coverage. We're lacking a little bit in the date of coverage on the pastoral liability. But basically for sexual abuse and molestation, we're currently at a $50,000 limit, all right, which is well shy of the $1 million limit the conference wants to see out of it. And what the conference has said is they want us to provide insurance where we purchase insurance that includes what they call tail coverage. And all tail coverage is you purchase coverage for things that happened in the past that haven't been reported yet, for the best way to explain it. When it comes to sexual abuse and molestation, they want us to show tail coverage back to 1996, which seems like an astronomical amount of time. All right. I can tell you, because of working in the industry, there is no insurance company I could go and approach and purchase a claims made policy with tail coverage back to 1996. They also have a tail coverage time period set for the pastoral liability that's further back as well, not as far back as the sexual abuse and molestation. But these are some stumbling blocks that we have. The upside of it is our insurance is based upon what you call occurrence, that basically if that insurance policy was in force this year, but the report of that incident happening doesn't get reported for 5 years from now, we don't have to purchase special tail covers, because as long as this policy existed for the year that they say the incident happened, we're covered. Okay, so the policy follows the date of the occurrence, not the date of insurance we've purchased. Our policy has that. It's occurrence-based policy right now. So in all actuality, the type of coverage we have set up is better than what they're calling for by it being occurrence and claims made. When we submit our documentation, as of right now, I have proof of history of insurance back to 2007. I'm working currently on getting further proof further back than that to try and provide as part of our process. I'm also working with Southern Mutual. One of the hangups we had is somehow, some way, a prior pastor submitted information to Southern Mutual saying we had no safe sanctuary policy in place. And so we were never given options to increase that limit. Pastor Sharon has provided all the safe sanctuary information that has actually been very much beefed up since she came. And we follow very strict guidelines for background checks and everything now. That information is currently with Southern Mutual, so they can actually evaluate what limits they would be willing to offer us. So we may be coming back to have some discussion of, do we want to go ahead and do some increases in that coverage? Whether we're separating or not, I don't think it's a bad thing for us to revisit. Okay. Just going by society and where we are with how much litigation happens. And sadly, that's a topic that seems to be coming up more and more within churches. So, don't think it's a bad thing anyway for us to revisit that no matter what our church is deciding to do. But that is something that is currently pending that could change our number for our insurance. What I'm basically going to have to do in addition is when we get ready to submit all of our documentation to the district, they don't know it, or the conference, they don't know it yet, but they're getting a narrative from me that's explaining to them why our insurance actually provides what they're looking for, but without going out to buy another policy. All right, so I'm going to try and provide some narrative that way to kind of educate our conference on insurance to go along with what we're providing. I can't guarantee we're going to have the full adherence to everything they're asking, especially with that far back to 1996. I may not be able to come up with that in the time deadline that I have, but that's something that's in the works. Okay. The very last page of your handout that you'll receive provides a couple of resources. And the first is the SCT UMLLG. And that is an organization. It's the South Carolina Traditional United Methodist Lay Leadership Group. This was a group that was specifically formed in South Carolina for churches and lay leaders that were concerned about the proposed vote and the proposed changes, who are not wanting to make changes to it, who want to stay under the traditional pathway. And so they are providing, they have a website, standingonscripture.org, that it's back to every other week now, that there are Zoom calls that we can join. And we have had the attorney on those Zoom calls. We've had appraisers on those Zoom calls. We have a whole bunch of churches on those Zoom calls where everyone has an opportunity to discuss the topic and what's going on. You kind of learn what a lot of other churches are doing. Even if you don't want to join them and join up to sign into the Zoom calls, they have a blog on there where you can read the notes as to what transpired on each of those Zoom calls. So you can get a lot of information there. They also have a resources tab where all of the documents, the frequently asked questions sheet, the discernment process, the checklist, the cost estimator sheet, the agreement to separate, all those different documents that have been put forth from the conference. There's even a link to Bishop Holston's response and exit plan introduction. All those things are there within that website. So it is a great wealth of information. Obviously, I've already signed up under their organization to receive the emails and join the Zoom calls and things like that. But it's open to anyone who would like to check out that website and kind of follow along, or if you'd like to sign up and join the Zoom calls as well. The National Center for Life and Liberty, there's reference to that under the SCT UMLLG website as well. The NCLL is the nonprofit legal organization that is assisting churches in South Carolina and other states. They've actually been doing a lot of other states as well, who want to pursue the traditional United Methodist pathway. They are the ones that's heading up the joint litigation effort that's happening and being considered. The attorney did tell Randall and I this last week on our call that they don't know exactly at this point how many churches we're going to have in joint litigation, because everyone has till March 1st to do their church conference vote. So end of February, beginning of March is going to be a pretty crucial time here in finding out, where they say the rubber hits the road, to find out which churches are actually in the litigation, which are choosing to do nothing, which are choosing to, do other types of options. So the NCLL, if we are going different routes where local representation is needed, they already have an agreement with Bannister, Wyatt, and Stelvey out of Greenville, South Carolina, a law firm out of Greenville, to provide the local representation. But the NCLL, as we were even working through the cost worksheet, we reached out and said, what can we anticipate for the cost to incorporate? And they came back and said that we would have to pay the fees to the state in order to file for the new tax ID and everything. But because we paid that $1,000 to become a member of their organization for the next year, all of the redeeding of our properties that may be needed, all of the new name organization and incorporation, all of that stuff they will do as part of the services for us. So we will have other services depending on which direction we go. We're going to need some legal assistance no matter what direction we really go in this situation. So it's actually nice that, we did do that. We have a year at this point under their membership for that $1,000 that we have their assistance. So You know, I did share the information there on that. At this point, we're open questions. Anyone want to come up, share information, share viewpoints? The mic is open.
I got one question about the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I heard things wrong. I thought Randall said that we go through this discernment process, the call, when you talk about the calls, he said $20,000.
Mm-hmm. That's a 3-year total.
That's why.
That's a 3-year total. 3-year total. That's 3 years of insurance.
Why are we paying that to them when we pay in our own insurance?
Paying it to them versus just we have to do that.
We have to show 3 years of insurance. So we're incurring the expense, but that's not necessarily going to go to them. We just have to put it into the escrow account so that we have the 3 years worth of insurance allocated there for it. So yeah, not everything that's going into that escrow will be paid to them directly, but we have to still account for that cost. Because like the incorporation fees to do our new tax ID number and everything, that won't get paid to the conference. We'll pay that out, but that still has to be calculated into our cost calculations.
What's the total of that Mr. Randall put out compared to what we have in the bank? Is it 80%, 90%? Now, the total over there, you know, the liquid assets in the bank is a little over $200,000. The total is about 103. So about half below. The question was on the board that it said, is this a good use of church's money? It's a good use of church's money, in my opinion, to do what the Lord said, not what somebody else has said. That means anything that we have at our disposal to do the things we should be doing, should be done. That doesn't mean that I'm saying go run and spend everything.
Right,
If it's
right.
money that we've got that we don't need day to day, then it's a good use of the Lord's money. That's my
Okay.
opinion. Do you know how many churches have signed up with the legal?
We do not at this point, because there's not actually been a lawsuit filed yet. And because the churches have till March 1st to hold their conference. So the attorney told us the end of February, beginning of March is when they will be following up with all the different churches that have signed on under them in order to determine how many are under the joint litigation. That's the hard part, is because we're having to make decisions with still a lot of gray area involved. We don't know what's going to happen in the 2024 vote, but yet we've got to kind of be prepared now for what does Green Pond Church want to do at that time period if it goes through. And we don't really know how many are going to be in the joint litigation. What had been shared with us from the attorney before is that they had told us that their intent was to cap the litigation fees at $3,500 per church within the litigation. I'm sure that's based upon them feeling they're going to get a good response. And I mean, and when you look at the cost, I mean, think about our church, and our cost to buy out is almost $103,000. You know, I know that there are other surrounding churches. One of the large churches in Simpsonville, they've put in requests to separate, and I've heard straight from them, we don't have the money to buy out, and we can't go take a loan out for this. So we're pretty much going to be forced to join the joint litigation. And they've been saying that about a lot of the small churches that don't have funds and savings. You know, a lot of the small churches that want to separate don't have the money to put in an escrow by May 31st. They're going to, you know, kind of be backed into the corner to probably have to join the joint litigation too. But it's tough. No, go ahead.
You don't get if they get their name on our deed or not.
Their name is not on our deed.
We want to get everything we got, their name on and send it back to them. They have to sign it off. They did it, all they do is sue us.
Yeah. Yeah, they could come back and sue us. If we said we're out, we're not paying you and doing any of this stuff, then we open it up for them to try and come back on us and sue us.
I don't don't see how an agreement written by people in the district can out trump a deed.
But from talking to lawyers, one thing he did say, that is a real claim that they had.
Yeah.
So in other words, he didn't expect his expectations, right? So we got this 10% plus these other costs planned that the bishop provided, right? We think, okay, personally, it would bother me to pay a portion of it or whatever, but I don't see how they have a claim, they're claiming the property. Anyway, he said, yeah, legally they do, so I wish it was that simple.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks the most likely outcome is some sort of compromise or negotiated settlement somewhere between, the numbers that are up there and, no interest in the property.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what he expected.
Yeah.
He also commented that, even though we could go the route of just up and leaving, take stuff and change the sign and leave and let them see you, that he fully expected that they would do that. They got plenty of lawyers, and I think as you mentioned earlier, said they have dug their heels in and other states, and he would fully expect them to sue us if we would just up and leave, without following the plan.
If a lawsuit comes up, it's going to be federal or is it going to be like,
I'm not sure.
That I don't know.
One thing I learned about is I'm not a lawyer. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know which jurisdiction would rule, whether it would be here, whether it would be where the conference is located. I'm not sure on that.
Guess I got another question too, is not being smart, but does it really matter how many churches decide to do it? Because
No,
we disassociate, we're not associated with them
no,
unless they're gonna form a new church, we go in with them.
right. No, it doesn't matter how many other churches are doing whatever they're doing. I mean, we know we have members that have talked to other local churches that one said, our pastor hasn't even really talked to us about this. Another one said, yeah, we're not doing anything. I mean, it's all over the board. It's just what every church feels is the right decision for them.
And if you stay with them, they start sending new preachers at their discretion, what are we gonna get?
Yeah.
And one thing I will say, from a lawsuit standpoint, I think it may get their attention if there's a lot of churches get involved in litigation, and that may make them think a lot more seriously about offering a little better.
Yeah.
Of the four choices you gave, three of them were a gamble. One was the only one to pay their ransom.
Yep.
That's the only guarantee we got is to pay the ransom, because the other three are gambles. And if we're gonna gamble, then let's gamble, but I don't feel safe there.
Yep.
Because a lot of people that can't afford to do it are gonna crumble and stay under it, and just the members will just disappear.
That's what he said. The attorney said.
Members all disappear from here, which I hope it doesn't happen. There's nothing to go on but what was on that thing closing because the church couldn't function.
Yeah, the attorney said one of the things to understand is out of the gate, it sounds really good, and almost every church goes, I'm going to join that litigation. And then when they realize they have to stay under the United Methodist Church, and it's such a long drawn out process, it may take a year or two to even get to some sort of settlement. And they're kind of a little bit in limbo in that time period. He said, then you start seeing churches going, well, we could pay, let's just pay and be done with it. And so he was saying kind of along the same lines with the joint litigation, that
The changes that were done to the exit plan were done by the bishop here.
yes,
So it's not like it's the world saying the same thing as him.
correct. Yeah. Now his cost sheet is the same exact cost calculation sheet that was under 2553 originally,
Yeah, he
But-
didn't do anything to just
reiterated under his own plan.
Exactly like when we closed the church and we used some of her.
Yeah.
And again, this is my, John Cade's opinion, folks.
That's why we're here, John Cade.
I didn't see being held for ransom as the way we should be able to leave, but that's the one we can do.
They got us in a box and they know it. I
Mhm.
think the discernment process, correct me if I'm wrong, since we gotta pay, if we wanna pay out, we gotta pay 1 year behind portions and one in front.
Well, there was some language though, as we went through the cost separation language, it sounded like the only reason you have to pay the arrears is if you haven't already paid those apportionments.
If it was ever any portion, so,
It doesn't exactly, well, I'm not reading what you read. It also says if we decide to follow the process, then the conference has got to approve.
That's correct. Yeah, we don't exit unless we get approved to leave.
If you have a preacher, you got to stay in the United Methodist Church till the bishop decides where to replace that preacher. Right?
Repeat that again. We have to stay in until well, that would coincide though, because they would do pastor appointments at the end of June, and that's when they're looking at the closure of the church happening. So yes, you would continue through till the closure date, which is anticipated to be the end of June, according to their timeline. And then your pastor, depending on what you're doing at that point, you would either get a new pastor or lose your pastor if you're going independent or whatever.
Dictator we got down there, he can play with these things.
Then the next big question becomes, what are you going to do next?
Yes. Yeah.
If what I hear talking to people all over the state, the number of churches getting out, it's gonna be a big dollar loss. Of course, they're getting a big influx of money
Mhm.
if we pay them out.
Yeah, I
don't
do.
know exactly what that number is. One of our former pastors told me that a couple recently about 10% or something. About, I think that's national.
And already got that.
National,
Not South Carolina,
just a little less than 10%.
but it just depends, like,
They should have ruled no church could leave.
yeah. Well, it depends on where you're at too, because like half of the churches of Texas disaffiliated. So, it depends on where you're at and what transpired as to where that number came from. But think of how many United Methodist churches there are around the country. Yeah. And I know on one of the Zoom calls, the attorney actually was on that Zoom call, and he had said in one of the other states where they did pursue a joint litigation, he said that the United Methodist Church was not willing to do any sort of negotiation. He said, and that one had happened about 10 months in, and it was whenever the depositions and discovery period of having to submit documentation for discovery period for the lawsuit came about, then the United Methodist Church decided they would come to the settlement table. And he said, but we had to wait it out till it was time to start the actual depositions and discovery period. He said, so they dig in and they dig their heels in. They do. And they're lawyered up. They are.
Yeah, Michelle, you may have mentioned this, but just one comment on the global United Methodist Church. I guess the plan is for them to not have the trust clause, so meaning.
Yes.
If you did enter into the global United Methodist Church, you own your own property, right? They don't stake any claim.
Right.
to the property, the buildings, like the United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's not fully ready, at least for South Carolina.
Right.
There are no churches from South Carolina we're aware of that are in the global Methodist Church. I think, maybe at some point or something like that, that might be an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess the other thing is from a discipline standpoint, right? I think everyone can see and use their own judgment as far as where the politics of the church, not that the church are heading, right? But as far as changes to the disciplines, there won't be any changes to the disciplines before 2024, correct?
Correct.
Because that's when the next conference.
Mm-hmm.
What gets changed there.
Yeah.
For sure.
So the timing, the reason the March 1st date is important this year is because churches who have requested to separate, that has to be completed by March 1st, because then that will be voted on at the annual conference in June that happens. But the overall vote on the book of discipline changes and the split of the United Methodist Church, that doesn't happen till next year in April of 2024. At this point, it's anticipated that the conference bishop says that we would have options, that if we don't disaffiliate or separate this year, that we would still have options next year, but we just don't know. We just don't know what that'll look like or whether that is accurate, whether he will change his mind. You know, we don't know what will happen.
Well,
Yes.
what do you want us to do?
I want you to wait 1 second because Billy has a question.
I always want to say that before you name Bannister, I don't personally know him, but I think he's got a good case. And the reason I say that, I had to do deed restriction or go through in my work with Duke Power, they call it Duke Energy now. But you have a deed restriction, not like Matt put it.
Mhm.
The deed restriction is typed in the deed, but not private property.
Mhm.
This church is property.
Yeah.
Well, that's a deed restriction. Well, these people know that they didn't have that type in the property when it became Breeze on United Methodist Church.
Right.
So they come up with their sale and say, we don't have a deed restriction. We have a beneficiary right.
Right.
That's their word.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no mention of a beneficiary right in our deed.
No.
And I still say
No.
that the attorney, if you go through a lawsuit trying to reduce the fee from 10% down to a lower percent, I think you've got a good case for two reasons. One reason is that if they go before a jury, a common jury about here in South Carolina, they say, and they just bring up, well, you got deed restriction, but they typed in a deed. They say they have a beneficiary right. It's not typed in a deed. And they are saying, you know, if I was sitting on the jury, not because I'm saying I want out, but I just say, hey, y'all talking about God's property, my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the right to come up and say that. And there's a lot of people gonna say, I'll vote against them. And then another thing gonna happen is that little bishop down there in Orangeburg or Charleston or wherever the hell they live.
Mm-hmm.
And it don't matter. I know where he's gonna live. But what I'm trying to say is, one thing he thought about is, there's some small churches that would like to be out, but they can't call for up to 10%. And what he's gonna find out after a day of voting on it, if votes to go through, that a lot of them people, and if I was a member of a smaller church, we couldn't pay 10%. Well, may not to pay it, but I ain't gonna be no member. My money, you been getting there on Sunday. Guess what, folks? You ain't gonna get it no more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why it's closed the door on your church.
And I think Randall even made the comment the night we were working through the cost sheet. He said, it almost seems like they're gonna have to do something here, because why would you want to pigeonhole people in and have a whole bunch of unhappy churches under you?
It's not gonna have to, a lot of members would like to get out, we couldn't get out, so we couldn't pay our beneficiary or the tie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fine, may not get out, but I ain't gonna be a member.
Yeah.
I'll leave that church and go over to a church that could afford to get out, and I'll be a member of that church.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just sort of like politics of our country. Destroy everything that's traditional, destroy, you know, the nuclear family, destroy education, destroy religion, right out the online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that lawsuit of the church in my, that's one of this trial against the bishop, and it's still going on.
You mean with Robin Drees that was just put in? You mean with Robin Drees that was just appointed bishop in Georgia?
I got a friend I talked to in Georgia, and they say the biggest church in Atlanta is in a lawsuit with the bishop who's
Oh.
on this buyout.
Yeah, that's because the bishop in Georgia shut down allowing churches to request separation.
No, that was the other bishop.
That was the other bishop, okay.
Last
Okay, okay. I don't know that, Billy. I don't know.
year, and find out what's going on. I'll try to.
Just one, I'll add one other comment that we, and going through all this and trying to figure out, talking about it. You know, we did talk about the fact that, you know, if you do want to go with some of these other, Methodist church options, you know, like the Global Methodist in particular, right, is not ready at this time, right? One kind of side effect of staying a party in the joint litigation lawsuit is that it would kind of buy some time, right, potentially for those other options.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that is true. I mean, if we're in the joint litigation and nothing's happening quickly, it does give time to see what happens between now and then as well.
You know, I talked to somebody from the Southern Methodist Church, and she wanted us to call up their head doctor, and, you know, y'all need to come visit our church and all that. I said, what does the Southern Methodist Church do for you? Well, they furnished us a minister, but we hadn't had one for 6 months. And we get their literature. What we need to realize here, we pay into the Methodist United Methodist. Somebody, treasurer, you can correct me. I don't think we get 1 cent. I've been financial chair of other churches. We don't get no money from the Methodist Conference.
We do. Our sound system was granted from.
Oh, that was
But I'm
great.
just saying, you know, and that's kind of where there's a lot of money, there's a lot of places where that money goes and help me get to seminary. A lot of the pastors get scholarships. People, kids that are in school, our college students can apply for scholarships to them. There are a lot of places where you might not benefit yourself, but that where families and people within the congregation, within the membership to actually benefit. You know, we can actually give you, I'll actually print you on things to show what all the apportionments are made up of.
Well, I've seen that. I go through that. And we voted not, at another church, not to pay some of that. And the DS come back and said, if y'all don't pay 100%, we're gonna move the pastor. I tell you, I'm fed up with the Methodist church. I've been in the Methodist church since I was born. But I love Green Palm. But I want nothing after this with Methodist word on it. And you're changing, I want to change too.
Load your cows up and take them to Iowa.
Okay, I'm in my seat. I got my leg pinched over here.
Patty, do you have the documents to put out front? So Patty has the copies of the presentation and the agreement to separate. We're going to include in the back. If you'd like a paper copy, if we run out, I think we have like 25, 30 copies of the agreement to separate. We have 50 copies of the presentation at this point. The sign-up sheet is there as well. If you'd rather get those documents via email instead of the paper copy. Yes, we did a sign-up sheet. Everyone signed the sign-up sheet, right? Okay. Not this next Monday. Monday, the 13th at 6:30 is our next meeting that we're going to do. And, you know, and I hate to do it to you, but we're going to kind of go through this again and see if anyone has any further questions or anything. And then we kind of want to do a little bit of an exit poll, get a feel of where everyone was to know how we need to address our vote or approach our vote for the 26th. Or if you can't be here for the 13th, please let us know where you're leaning at this point. It will be helpful for us to know. That's all I have for you. Thank you all very much for your time, for your patience and understanding.
This clown.